Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Emerald the Quilter, and this Saturday I experienced my first airing of the Quilts event in Chappell Hill, Texas. This event took place right outside of Brenham, and if you've never been to that area, it's beautiful open spaces. There are farm animals around, and it's just about an hour and a half drive from where I live, which is pretty near Houston, Texas. And the highlight of my trip started at the beginning. So when I arrived to this small town in Chappell Hill, I parked right outside the church, not knowing that was going to be the very best part. And when I walked in, I was greeted by very friendly guild members from that area and saw beautiful quilts draping over the pews. The other guests and I were informed that these quilts were made by some of the guild members and to be presented to veterans pretty soon. So they were on display, and these quilts of valor were displayed in the center and on the left side of the church. And of course I brought my son with me, and he enjoyed looking at all the colorful quilts with me. And on the other side of the church were quilts also made by guild members, but I believe that they were there on exhibition or there for sale. I can't exactly quite remember, but all of them were gorgeous. Most of these quilts were either quilted by a long arm or quilted by hand, and this mini quilt was just beautiful, decorated at the front. And this large quilt was all hand applique. I believe it's needle turn applique, and this quilt was being not auctioned off, but it was being raffled off. So one of the guild members was at the table selling raffle tickets for this quilt, and I bought 6 tickets for $5, and that was very exciting. I don't know if I'm gonna win this quilt, but how cool would that be? There were many people purchasing raffle tickets there, and I've never seen a quilt like this. There's so much detail. I love the blue bonnets, and I don't have the patience to do something like this, so I deeply admire the quilters' work and labor of love that was put into this quilt. All of the quilting is just amazing. It's custom quilted. There are different designs. There's sort of like a plaid look, some waves, some feathers, some swirls, and it just highlights all of the applique, makes the applique come forward. And I love that it's Texas themed, and the words give it a nice touch too. This quilt, to my understanding, was already featured in a show or is going to be featured in a show soon, so I was excited to get to see it in person. And here are some of the quilts from another perspective. Just a lot of red, white, and blue. Lots of guests coming in and out of the church. And again, the ones on the left were not quilts of valor, but they were just colorful and very beautiful quilts. The guild members selling the raffle tickets was so sweet. She took a picture with me. Her name is Suzanne, and so I just wanted to give her a shout out. Hi, Suzanne. Thank you for taking a picture with me and talking to me about the guild. I learned a lot of cool things, like how there are 2 guild groups in the area, one called the Friendship Guild and one called the Hens and there we are. One called the Hens and Needles Guild, I think it's what it was called. And I love that there are different tiers of membership. So in the Hens and Needles, you can start off as a peep, and then you can start off as a chick when you meet certain requirements. And then once you've taught a class, you are a hen. So that was really cool. Once I left the church, I walked down that beautiful garden that you saw and noticed some quilts hanging from trees and in front of the little store, like a boutique store. And the owner mentioned that the quilts that were hanging from the trees were just there on display, but the ones that were draped over those little wire fences in the lawn were actually hers, and they were for sale. And they were very pretty. They looked very vintage. They looked like they were hand quilted and that they were made with fabrics that were a little less modern, and there were actually more hand quilted and quilts that looked like with this style inside the shop in a beautiful glass cabinet, and I really loved looking at all the quilts there. The shop was so pretty. There was a lot of home decor, so if you love shopping around for knickknacks and decorations for different seasons, for different holidays, the antique shops here in Chappell Hill are the place to go. This quilt was one of my favorite. It's so colorful, and it was draped outside of one of the larger antique shops that I visited. This quilt here is actually a double, so I think there were 2 of those, and those were my top favorite because I really love scrappy quilts and I love quilts that can be done quickly, so strip piecing just really draws my attention. This next shop was one that was right next to a garden shop, so I guess a plant nursery, and it had beautiful knickknacks inside, and there were even some like quilt books and old bags that looked like they were handmade, and purses made out of jeans, and the plants were decorated beautifully alongside this shop and then also around the plant nursery. You can see across the street that there are more quilts just hanging off of the buildings, and people are stopping to look at them and check the prices that are posted on the papers. Oh, and then this quilt was the second scrappy strip piece quilt, and I love the quilting on it. I had to record it. It's quilted with variegated thread, and it just inspired me to quilt my next scrappy quilt, possibly with some variegated thread. This antique shop was my favorite of all of them. This one had the most quilty items. You can see the quilts for sale. There's pillowcases for sale, cross stitch, handkerchief, even just blocks that are on like cross stitch holders, and they are completed with backing and everything ready to be displayed. Vintage magazines for quilting and beautiful quilting books, just lots of cute quilting items for sale, lots of beautiful knickknacks, cute t-shirts, nice clothes. This one, not only was it one of the largest, but it just had more variety, and the owner and the employee were just the sweetest. They were friendly, and I learned that the employee there had been working for 30 years at this shop, and I just thought that that was amazing. They did let me take a picture, and so I had a lot of fun visiting this shop. I think I spent more time here than in any of the other shops, and if you love antique shopping, I highly recommend this one. You can find anything from dolls, vintage toys, little vintage rocking chairs for dolls, to items for your kitchen, of course all vintage themed, lots of costume jewelry, and just vintage toys. Everything was very vintage and just very, very charming. I loved all the items there. I would really like to make it back out here to Chappell Hill because I learned that there are several events throughout the year. So there are events posted on the Chappell Hill town website, and if you would like to visit the town and attend these events, you can go there to see what's going on, as well as some of the other events, quilty events even, happening in neighboring towns. So Giddings next week, I learned, is having their own airing of the quilts, and so that's very exciting. I won't be able to make it. Oh, and there they are. The owner's on the right and the employee was on the left. But if I could make all the quilt events around the Houston area and right outside of Houston, I definitely would. My son, he kicked off his sandals because it was getting warm. There was a nice breeze that day, so it was just right to be out and about. We went early in the morning, and the nursery owner, the shop owner, was watering her plants. She was there. If she was not the owner, she was the employee. But here, the employees were also very friendly, and they had a lot of beautiful plants. It was exciting to see that there were quilters of all ages. So I even saw like teenagers there, small children. There was another toddler there in the stroller, and there was a presenter who was providing information on stained glass piecing, or I think it was called reversed applique, and it was really cool. I have seen reverse applique before, mostly in color, but this was made with black fabric and then rainbow colors to make it look like stained glass. The presenter's name is Carol Ann Marr, and she was there providing presentations like every half hour or every hour, and she had quilt kits for sale. She had some of her own books for sale and even a children's book. So I did buy the children's book. I believe it's called the Elephant's Quilt or the Elephant's Stitch Quilt, something like that, and I bought that for my son. And when I bought it, he opened it immediately, and he was just flipping through the pages and looking at the pictures. But I'm glad that there was a children's book with quilting as its topic that I could buy for him. So as I just kept walking down the shop street, I saw a lot more quilts. This one here was one of the only ones I noticed with a quilt label, and it also had the coolest backing fabric, I think. Some silly witches with cats and pumpkins, and the front is also pretty cool, but I was definitely attracted to the fabric on the back. Almost all of these quilts are for sale, and they are made by the guild members there. This one, it says it's number 84, so that's how it's identified, and you can see who made it, and it's for sale for $400. And the fabric on this quilt is just so fun. So there is the poster for Carol Ann, and right outside of the studio where Carol was presenting was this beautiful quilt. It was very light. I don't think it has any batting in it because of the type of quilt it is. I know it has the word window in it, and I've made it once for a pillowcase, but that was a long time ago. So I'm officially on the other side of the street walking along this tiny little town, and there are quilts that have different techniques. So this one with the cow and the truck has applique and embroidery, and it's also hand quilted, I think it was. This one is pieced and English paper pieced as well. This is definitely custom quilted. And right now I'm standing outside of the bank. So it's the tiniest bank that I've ever seen, and so cute, very charming. Here is another quilt with different techniques. So embroidery, applique, and I think this one is also hand quilted. Here we have a beautiful patriotic quilt. This looks like it's a little bit older, so I don't think that all of the quilts were necessarily like new or recently created quilts. I know that this one upcoming on the left is a very old quilt. It has an identifier on it as a heritage quilt. And when I zoom in here, you can see how the fabric is starting to disappear, and it is for sale, but it looks like it was made a long time ago, and I didn't read all of it, but there it is. If you want to pause the video, you can read what they provided. So this quilt reminds me of a quilt that I've made, and it was a lot of work. So those star triangles that are sticking out, and I mean, that's Y seams, and Y seams are not easy. So this was beautiful work, and of course that's all hand quilted. There's the batting showing through, but it's still really beautiful. The quilt pattern that I've used to make a star like that is called Supernova by Laundry Basket Quilts, and I think I made about 20 or 25 of those stars so that the quilt could fit my king size bed, and it was the only quilt to this date that I've ever paid a long armor to quilt. At about this time, it started sprinkling, and you can kind of see it just a little bit, and I heard some shop owners say, "It's raining down at this town." My cousin or my sister, they just called me, and they were checking and just making sure that the quilts were not going to get wet. And luckily it did not start raining, and the sprinkling happened for just a little bit and it stopped. So now I'm finally back at the opposite end where I started. So I'm by the church, very close to the church where I had parked, but just on the other side. And then this was my other favorite quilt. So it was huge, and it was probably all the way up there so that no one would touch it because it is just gorgeous. There was a lot of love put into this event, and the streets were sectioned off with cones so that people couldn't drive too close, and I just had a lot of fun. It was a really great experience. My son enjoyed just being pushed around in his stroller and seeing everything that was colorful and all the shapes, and by the end he was saying, "Quilt, quilt." I was like, yes, good job, that is a quilt. This area here is near the very end, and I loved this quilt. So this quilt had cross stitch on it, and you can see that the fabric is torn away. I don't know how old it is, but it is beautiful, and it's hand quilted. It's just one large piece of white fabric, and that's a lot of work. But they were all for sale. Beautiful quilts, and it was quite windy. I did slow the video down so that I could have enough time to say what I saw, but you can still tell that the quilts are flapping in the wind. This one here was beautiful, and if I had a baby girl, I would want to buy it. But it reminds me of Lori Holt fabric. So not quite as bright, but definitely those types of colors and motifs. I had so much fun at this event. It was the first of its kind for me, and I'm just going to want to try to go to more of them. We did stop for lunch, and I had a delicious barbecue sandwich that I shared with my son, and people were walking up to me telling me how I had the most handsome date, and I was like, yes, I do. Thank you so much. But I hope you guys enjoyed this close-up of the airing of the quilts in Chappell Hill, right outside of Brenham. And if you weren't able to make it this year, definitely try to make it out next year so they have it every year, and I know I'm going to want to go again. Thank you all. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe.